Well, let's get started here at 7 o'clock. Thank you all for coming and letting me know you were coming. I appreciate it, particularly on a cold, wet night. It's not really cold, but it is wet. This is the 46th speaker program in the Center for International Sport Business speaker series. And we're fortunate to have Dr. Steve Posner here with us this evening. I'll give you a little bit more about his background at the beginning of the program. But I want to acknowledge the Western New England University Alumni Association that sponsors the CISB Speaker Series. As I said, this is the 46th speaker of national, international renown that have come to Western New England for the benefit of our students here. So I appreciate you all coming out, and we'll have a great time. As you know, the tradition of the CISB speaker program is we have a conversation, the guest and I, Dr. Posner and I, and for the last 15 minutes or so, there's an opportunity for you to engage our guest and to ask questions, and for Dr. Posner to dispense pearls of wisdom from his life and career. So we'll look forward to that as well. But I want to give you a little bit of background about Dr. Posner. You might know that he's retired after 35 years as the head men's gymnastics coach at Springfield College down the road. So he has a storied career as the gymnastics coach. But let's back it up a little bit. He was a gymnast in his own right at Cal Berkeley. Back then, I think they only allowed you to participate in varsity for 3 years. Were you eligible as a freshman or no back then?
I was.
Oh, you were?
I was.
Okay.
Yep.
So I thought they had a rule back then that freshmen were not eligible. Maybe that's for basketball.
Could be.
Yeah. So anyway, he was an All-America. He earned All-America honors in the floor exercise. And he led his university, coincidentally named the Golden Bears, right, Cal Berkeley, to the NCAA Division I championship. So he has a national championship under his belt. He was a member of the United States elite national team for gymnastics from 73 to 75. And he won a gold medal in the floor exercise and the all-around at the 1973 Maccabea Games. If you're not familiar with the Maccabea Games, it's an international sport competition akin to the Olympics, and it really features Jewish and Israeli athletes in a multi-sport event, Olympic style. It's actually the third largest mega sporting event after the Olympic Games and the World Cup. So this is a big deal. It's a huge mega sporting event. And so Steve, your specialty was the floor exercise, but educate us about men's gymnastics and the events. And does everybody participate in all of them, or do you specialize? We need some education.
Yes. Well, the all-around is kind of like a decathlon. It's all the events, which are floor, okay, pommel horse, which is like a box with handles on it, and you swing circles around it. Rings, which takes a lot of upper body strength. Vaulting, where you run at a full sprint. You hit a board and you jump over, and you usually in a handspring motion. Parallel bars. There are 2 parallel bars, and you swing under and over the bars, and horizontal bar. Now, a lot of the gymnastics is getting popular because they do so many of the exercises now in CrossFit. Okay, like the muscle ups and handstand push-ups. And there's a lot of my athletes in the last several years, they became ninja warriors, and a lot of them went right to the national level, and they were on television because it takes so much conditioning and so much fitness. But I competed in the all-around, and it used to be, because the gymnastics teams are small internationally, you have more of a chance to make the Olympic team or national competitions if you do the all-around. You have to be really, really unbelievable to make it to make an Olympic team if you're only on one event, because your contribution in the all-around is 6 events versus 1. But you can think of being a specialist, like in track and field, being a shot putter versus doing a decathlon, all the events.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you know, every sport has their specialty, but as Dr. Posner said, in gymnastics, in a team event, you have to be able to carry and support the team. And if you just excel in one of the events, well, good for you, but you're not helping the team with the points advance in the other events. If you're weak, you're being a laggard there, right? And so the net contribution is not very good there. Explain to us a little bit about the culture of gymnastics, and in comparison, you have 6 events on the men's side and 4 on the women's side. And why is that, and why are they different? Well, other than the floor exercise, and women have the vault as well, right?
The floor and the vault are the same. And then probably because ring specifically is upper body, which would favor upper body strength, which would favor the men's on that event. So women don't do the rings, but they do the balance beam, which favors balance. And actually, women would generally have a little bit more advantage because their center of gravity is because women generally have wider hips than men. The center of gravity is lower to the beam. It's hard for a really tall, slender woman to be a top performer. The women gymnasts and the men gymnasts are generally shorter because it's a sport which deals with the relative body strength. And if you're 6'2", you can do it, but you have to be a beast. Versus if you're 5'6", 5'7", like I am, where it's easier to be strong in relationship to your body weight, which is the only thing that's important. It's not like football, where you're a lineman and you got a defensive lineman, offensive lineman, and you got to push them over. If you're 5'7", you're not going to do it. Okay, if the other guy on the other side is 6'2". Although it's pretty cool to note that Belichick and always had those little guys, doing slants and things like that. And believe it or not, there are some top players that are 5'6", about my weight, 170. Edelman is one of them. He's a little taller, but I think the first one was probably Joe Morris from the Giants. But anyway, that's an interesting aside. Shut me up if I do.
No, this is great. This is what we want. This is because we cannot assume that our audience here is steeped in the culture of the sport and knowledgeable about it. So we got to kind of talk about some basics and nuances. Have any of you been to a gymnastics meet? It's very impressive. These are some of the finest specimens of athletes, both on the male and the female side. Just in terms of the fitness and the musculature, just to do the events that we're talking about here. I mean, it's incredible. You should see up close and personal a guy, a male gymnast on the rings, and think about whether you could do those routines. Never mind the balance beam for the women's side, doing somersaults and that kind of thing. I apologize, Dr. Posner. I was talking. I was so excited that you're here. I neglected to properly introduce you. And so let's give Dr. Posner a warm Golden Bear welcome. Thank you. Thank you. And let's back up a little bit and tell us, how did you get into gymnastics? What was that something that you, as a child, showed some interest?
Oh, these are fun questions.
Or did your parents influence you in some way?
Well, my dad was a 2-sport athlete at Penn State. He went to Penn State for a couple of years, then went to World War II, and then he went back and finished up in Penn State. But he was primarily a baseball player, and then the coach at Penn State saw him kicking handstands in the outfield, and his name was Gene Whetstone, who was a very famous gymnastics coach. And he recruited my dad for gymnastics. He didn't know much. He was just a good athlete. But he was very strong in relationship to his body weight. And he put him on the flying rings, which was, they used to have the rings that used to go up and back in the gym. Okay, and you hung and you swung, and it's very hard, okay, to keep your body in one position when it's going back and forth. So he recruited my dad. So anyway, growing up, my dad used to walk up and down the stairs on his hands, okay? And I thought that was pretty cool. So, and again, stop me if I get too...
That was normal for you growing up in that family with your father walking up the stairs.
Yeah. So my brother was a musician and went to Interlochen Music Camp in Traverse City, Michigan. He was a pianist and a violinist, went to music camp. And on the road, we used to drive him. We passed a gymnastics camp on the road called National Summer Palestrum. And my dad, and we looked around. He said, well, look at this. He says, you want to go? So I said, sure. So I was in 7th grade. So I went there and had a fun summer. And the year went by. And then I came back the next year. And I saw a lot of the kids, the same kids. And they were doing some great stuff. And I was the same place. And they were much better than me. And I couldn't figure out how. So I said, hey, if I'm going to stay with this, I don't want to go back again and see all my friends and have them be so much better than me. I got to find some place to train. So I grew up in New York City. I grew up near New York City. And we looked on Long Island, but there weren't many places. And in the high schools, my high school didn't have a team. And for insurance reasons, a lot of the other teams wouldn't let me train there. So I found places all over New York City to train. Flushing YMCA, Eastern Queens YMCA, Central Queens YMCA. And then later I got better and I got into the New York Athletic Club. And so I used to jump on the train and go in a couple times a week, at least. And then I found some other places on Long Island to train. So the way I got started was through my dad and through summer camp. And it's like anything else, the people that you meet. I met people all over the country, so I had some really close friends, and over the Christmas breaks, I used to go to Chicago, and because they had a big gymnastics program, they had both through the Park and Rec and through their high school programs. And the people, they just keep in touch with you, and that really keeps you involved.
It was different back then, though. The gymnastics clubs were not like they are today. Back in your day, you just have to go find a place where you could do some training, right?
Yeah, really, they didn't have clubs, but the YMCA's were really, really pretty good in gymnastics, and because gymnastics is really a fundamental in physical education. So, physical education curriculums really revolved around gymnastics and things similar to gymnastics for calisthenic type exercises. So the YMCA's did have, but they didn't have gymnastics clubs. But they had more high school programs. And then the interesting thing is that when clubs started happening, the high school programs stopped existing, because a lot of the coaches from the high schools found out they could make more money starting their own gymnastics clubs, and they came into the gymnastics clubs, open gymnastics clubs, and it took away a lot from the high schools, and it changed what gymnastics was. Instead of being a one-season sport, it became more an all year round sport, and it changed the complexion of the sport and really hurt high school participation in the public schools.
It got serious at the club level, and parents were pushing their kids to excel, because in their mind they were looking at the next Olympian, right?
Exactly.
And they were paying top dollar to send their kids to the clubs. But as you said, as a consequence, the high schools programs all dried up.
That's right.
Now, how did you find your way out to California, being a New York kid?
Okay. again,
Back then, this was the heyday of gymnastics and men's gymnastics. There were lots of programs to choose
oh yeah,
from,
oh yeah.
including in the East,
Yes.
top net ranked programs.
Yeah, and all the when I was in high school, high school gymnastics was very popular. So the question is how did I?
Yeah, and being an Eastern seaboard kid,
Oh, okay.
finding your way out to California.
All right, okay.
It's a different lifestyle.
Yeah. So what happened is I did train very seriously because I was going to all these programs, pretty much at least 5 days a week, and then also I got some gymnastics equipment and put it in my basement, and and I had all these people calling me, encouraging me, and I finally was able to start a club at my high school. We didn't have a team, but I started a club because you had to have a program that your high school sponsored in order to be in the state meet. So it took me until my senior year, and I had a club. We used to practice at 6 in the morning, and I got acceptance to enter the state meet. I entered the state meet my senior year, and I won the floor exercise, and I was second in the all around. So I was recruited all over the country, and actually at the time, the Japanese were the best in the world in gymnastics, and we had a top Japanese coach. His name was Mr. Watanabe. We called him Watanabe-san. Okay, and he went to Nitai Dai University, which is a physical education university in Japan, and he was much more advanced than the United States at the time. We were about 7th in the world. Japan was number 1 in the world, hands down, in gymnastics. So that's where I wanted to go, and I being one of the top in New York, which was a good state in gymnastics. I was able to get a scholarship there. I had many offers, and I chose that really because of the coach. And he went on to be the head of USA Gymnastics, and he revolutionized the sport in the United States because he had such good understanding of technique. That was one of the many interesting cultural experiences I had as a result, because his system was very different than what I grew up with. I was in New York, so I had no in the YMCA's I'd have 25-year-olds, I'd have 15-year-olds, and there was no hierarchy. Boy, when we went into the gym, the freshmen cleaned the gym, okay, and it was very culturally different, a true hierarchy of respect, and he was up there. So it was very interesting, and you learn when you travel many different ways of doing things, and that's one of the great benefits of having sporting experiences in so many countries and meeting athletes from all over the world.
So Berkeley was cutting edge because, as Dr. Posner said, the Japanese were recognized as tops in the world, and they had an assistant men's gymnastics coach of Japanese ancestry there, and he really helped revolutionize the sport. And not many, or very few, I don't know how many others, had the Japanese insight and had people from Japan on the staff to help with the programs. So you guys were cutting edge back then.
Yeah, we were. And he went on to become the technical director of USA Men's Gymnastics, and then men's gymnastics went from 7th to be, one of the top countries in the world. And that was definitely what he brought to the program. He just organized the program on basics and technique, and really helped our programs.
That's funny, as an aside, my dad, I'm from Hawaii, as most of you know, and my dad came to Springfield College, and many people would ask him that, you're from Hawaii, why would you go to school at Springfield College where it's cold and snow and everything else? He says, because that's where basketball was invented. And he was a basketball player, and he played basketball at Springfield College, and he wanted to go to the birthplace, as Ken Wall would say, to the birthplace. So there's always, it's interesting to find the rationale for why people do things and why they pursue different lines and avenues in life. Well, we just heard Dr. Posner's reason for going out to Berkeley. So you obtained your bachelor's at UC Berkeley, and then your master's in physical education from Syracuse, and then a PhD from UConn. Had you always thought about being an academic-minded person going to get the terminal degree, the PhD? Because at the time you were still coaching and heavily invested and time-wise consumed, and what was your thinking? Not too many coaches have PhDs, by the way.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking.
Well, I graduated from Cal and loved it there, but all my family was in New York. So, I felt like I was on vacation for, 4 years, If I was to do it again, I probably would have made it 5, because I would have taken advantage of going on more international meets. But I had in my mind I was supposed to graduate in 4, so I did, okay? Then I came back, and the only thing I had to do was a student teach to get my teacher's certificate in physical education. So I got a job in a private school, and basically their physical education program was a sports program. So basically you coach soccer, or you coach baseball, or you were a coach, and I figured that would be my inroads to teach physical education. But, I wasn't necessarily, didn't necessarily want to teach physical education. I mean, I liked it, but I just didn't know. So I used to, I figured I'll start my master's. So I went to Columbia Teachers College, which is near Harlem, a really tough area, and got my windows washed a couple times on the way, because that was, people would surround the car and wash your windows and make sure you paid them, because it was a rough time in New York City. So I started in exercise science, corporate fitness, because that was a whole new thing then. They were giving benefits to executives who were doing fitness, okay? So they were incentivizing. So I got an internship like at Exxon and these big companies, and it was really a big popular thing then. So I started doing that, and then some of my buddies called me and they said, gosh, you see, the reason I stopped gymnastics is because my senior year, I was on the national team for 3 years, and the Olympic year, I tore my Achilles tendon in my conference championship. Okay, so it was a bummer, because that was my year, and so, I was still kind of training, and I got my buddies called me and said, you can't give it up. So I got sponsored to train again. They sponsored me. They pay all for my expenses. And so I called some of my friends who were coaching in the area. I called Temple, and I called Syracuse, and they said, hey, look, why don't you just finish your degree at my college? I'll take care of all the expenses, and you don't even have to do anything. You just train, and you'd be like a super captain. So I went to Philly, and it blew my socks off, because Philly was, really tough then. Really tough. It was on Broad Street, one of the most economically depressed neighborhoods in Philadelphia. Since then, Philadelphia has really come up as a city, and it's done much better economically, but Temple's still a tough area. So I said, geez, I love Temple, but that's too much. And Syracuse was kind of nice. Okay, so I chose Syracuse.
What about Happy Valley, Penn State?
That's too far.
Too far.
Yeah, okay. So too far. So I just called the ones in the local area. Okay, those were the top programs. So I went to Syracuse, and I finished my degree and was a super captain and continued to try and compete. But my best events became my worst events, because I was favoring one side on my tumbling, and I just wasn't able to really come back. Now people are coming back with Achilles tendons because they changed the equipment. They put springs on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no springs back then?
No. No.
Wow.
No, I competed when I was a kid on bricks in
Wow.
the YMCA, a brick floor.
You guys know what we're talking about, the floor exercise? There's springs under there. You see how they get the elevation?
So then I got my degree at Syracuse, okay, and then right down the street from Syracuse, Cortland called me and said, geez, we need a coach. Could you coach? And Cortland has an excellent reputation in sports management, physical education. Actually, then there was no sport management, so it was physical education.
Yeah.
So I started teaching there, and I loved it. And then Springfield opened up, and I knew the history of Springfield, and I wanted a place that really valued what my field was. So I came to Springfield, and then I was in Springfield and teaching, and I was teaching principles and problems of coaching. A lot of skills classes, and I loved it. And they wanted to open up in 1986, they wanted to open up a sport management program. So they were looking for some sucker to get their PhD. They say, hey, you're a young guy. We're starting a sport management program. Yeah, we'll help you. You want to do it? So the two closest programs were UMass and UConn. And UMass's program was very set. You had to take this, and there was no flexibility, and I was working full time. I also had 2 kids at the time. And UConn, you had cognitive areas to choose from, so they were more flexible. And they were both about the same distance. And so I said, okay, let's go. So I went to UConn and got my doctorate in sports, exercise, and leisure services department, it was called at the time, with a concentration in, there wasn't really a specific program, sport management, but what I did is it was sport management, because I took some classes in the business school, like marketing, and then I took some classes here with a professor in leadership, Tony Chelty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, he was in leadership. I took a couple classes here, and I took some sports psychology programs there, because that was a part of the foundation of learning the psychology of sport. I took some educational leadership classes, and it was more of a flexible program. So it was good. So I did that like this. I just really busted it out. But then with the dissertation, I had trouble, because the dissertation is really about relationships. I mean, really, you got to have somebody who's going to pull you through. And because I did my class and I left because I was working full time, that took a while. But anyway.
I missed having you as a faculty member, because I was there in 86, 87 in the sport management program at Springfield College. I think some of you know that. So yeah, it was a great time. I enjoyed my experience there.
Yeah, that's when we started, in 86, 87, It was an interesting, I put together the first, through NASA, the first curriculum review to get accreditation.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it by really combining with the business department. And revising the curriculum. And then it came down to, where are we going to go? Are we going to go in sport, or are we going to go in business?
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother, that's a long conversation, so
another connection that Dr. Posner and I have is that he succeeded the longtime men's gymnastics coach by the name of Frank Wolcott, who was a classmate of my father's. And my dad would tell me stories about Frank when they were students at Springfield College, and they'd sneak into Judd Gymnasium and jump on the trampoline. But Dr. Posner retired in 2017 as the men's gymnastics head coach after 35 years on the job. It's quite a legacy you've left there.
And Naismith and Alonzo Stagg were all on the first gymnastics team. Gymnastics was the first sport at Springfield. So the guy that invented basketball was on the first gymnastics team at Springfield College.
Wow, I just learned something there. I didn't know that.
Yep. As was the grand old man of football, Amos Alonzo Stagg.
Yep.
He was on the team too.
Exactly. So you've coached 173 All-America student athletes in your tenure, including 25 national champions. How does it make you feel as a coach to have, the legacy of all of these gymnasts that were under your charge and they have done so well over your career? It's like my students here, they're going to go on to do great things, and it's going to make me proud. I'm proud of them already, but when we let them go out into their careers. But you have tangible evidence of success via the national champions and the All-America student athlete. Quite a stable.
Thank you. Yeah, well, gymnastics, I don't believe that there's such a thing as team sports and individual sports, because everything is really a team sport, because you don't work out in the closet. You're only as good as the atmosphere, okay? And I tried to coach as a team sport, but you do have the opportunity for also individual success. And not having scholarships like a lot of the people that we were competing against, what I was trying to do is maximize the potential of the team. And that means that everybody has to step up to raise their potential. And you've got more chances for All-Americans because you have 6 events plus the All-Around, okay, and top 6 places. So although we might not have beaten teams like Penn State, who we would go against, because we didn't have scholarships and we weren't on equal footing, even with NCAA rules were different as far as training time. But you could get these blue chippers who were, you could find talent, because if you understood the sport, you understood what it took to be a gymnast, and whether it was the upper body strength for rings or the speed for floor, for vaulting. And sometimes you could turn them into somebody really special if they had a great athletic background. And I would even in my early days at Springfield, they had 3 gymnastics classes, so I could even recruit a little bit from the classes. Because if a kid came in class and he could get up on the rings, pull himself up, and do an iron cross, okay? And there were kids like that. You knew there's something unusual about the kid. This kid could really be a gymnast, or just jump, just sky high, and just, just springs in their legs. You saw it in class. You could take a kid like that and you would make him a specialist. And so you try and maximize the potential of each individual. And a lot of hard work, and very often it can lead to some success.
Steve, take a look at this slide here. That's you circa 1975. I asked one of the students if he could strike that pose for us, and he said he never could. But you do a lot of stretching, I suppose, to get your body to a flexible state, to be able to do that on the floor exercise.
Yeah, that's called the V seat, and that takes strength in the back of your arms, called the triceps, because you're pushing back, and to get your feet from sitting to raising in that position, it takes abdominal strength. But once you get to that to that 90-degree position, and you can even rotate it back, it becomes more and more balanced. But that's a V seat.
Now there you are striking a coach's pose there, quintessential coach's pose. I asked you guys if you've ever been to a gymnastics meet. It's like a 6-ring circus. There's lots of things going on at the same time. Maybe not 6 events simultaneously, but several are going on. And when the music is cued, you know there's a floor exercise about to happen. As a coach, how do you focus on You got several of your athletes that are competing at the same time. Talk about that dynamic, because this is foreign to us.
Yeah, well, the reason why it's even more crazy when you hold the men and women's meet together, because then it's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you were to, there's 6 events in gymnastics, and you're trying to hold the attention of spectators too. So you ever been to a track meet? You know how they can get really long? Well, that would be a gymnastics meet too. In fact, when I started competing, there were a lot more than 6 events, because they did the rope climb, where you sat on your butt, and they had a little thing attached to the ceiling with tar on it, and you would go pull, 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 reach, and then you had to come down and show the judge that you touched the tar. Okay, and then they had the trampoline. Okay, and they had Indian clubs. Okay, so you have to have multiple events going on, else you're there all day. And even with multiple events going on, one of the drawbacks of a men's gymnastics meet is there's 6 events, so it takes longer than a women's gymnastics meet, which is 4 events. And people, at the end of an hour and a half, people are pretty much fried spectator-wise.
Yeah, but it's quite a show. You got to get yourself out to a gymnastics meet someday just to witness it. I've been to the Olympics and the Gymnastics World Championships, and that's the top level. And so it's quite a show to see that level of ability and talent.
Yeah, we had a gymnast at Springfield representing Jamaica in the World Championships in Montreal just recently. So, you know, I was there, and it is one of the best attended events at the Olympics each year.
Steve, I know you want to talk about some of these topics that you shared with me, and you had some show and tell here.
Yeah, sure.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things that if you talk to people involved in sport and coaches, a lot of things that they'll say is it's the relationships that keeps them in the sport, because it's so time consuming. Okay, I mean, when you finish your career, you remember the people, you know, first and foremost, and that's really what kept me in the sport for so long. And so, you know, I put together a little chart of there's a lot of things about leadership and how to lead a team, and you talk about the fitness, and you talk about the belief and the passion, and the team and the gamesmanship. And John Wooden has a pyramid which really focuses on. John Wooden was the coach at UCLA, and he won 10 national championships in basketball, and went on to publish a lot of what he learned in basketball, and really they're on the business shelves actually. But he really focused on his pyramid of sport, on how to prepare to be a great athlete, on what you have to do. And then I was looking at his stuff, and I said, that's really great. Now, I kind of thought, well, what should you learn through your sports participation? You know, other than how to shoot a basketball. If that's all you learn, and I'm sure if you talk to Coach K, he'd say it's really about the relationships too. I've read his books, okay? But what do you learn through sport? So some of the building blocks on developing life skills through sport are you start off with a mastery orientation, okay? And by that, I mean a mastery orientation is you focus on being good, on mastering the sport, okay? And on having a process focus that you learn how to work hard, because nothing happens by itself, okay? You want to be a master. All right, and then the next thing is that you want to be in an atmosphere that helps you build your self-confidence, because people that feel good about themselves do better. So you want to be in a nurturing environment where you get positive feedback, you build your self-confidence, because then success breeds success. It's like a snowball starting up the top of the hill, getting bigger and bigger and bigger as it rolls down the hill. It gets down the hill really big. Or if you roll it up a hill, as you roll it up, it gets bigger and bigger, gathers more snow. Okay? So rather than putting somebody down and saying, that's all wrong, that's not the way you do it, You want to catch somebody doing something right, as it's said in Blanchard's The 1 Minute Manager, and say, that's it. What did you do right that time? Explain it to me, okay? And make the person feel good about himself. Put people in a role where they can have success, okay? Then, if you do that, then you can build character, because you're feeling good about yourself. It's hard to shake hands and be a good teammate if you don't think you're any good. So, if you've built your self-confidence, then you can really respect the competition, respect yourself, respect the game, and really concentrate on character development. Okay, and really what teachers and coaches want is for you to develop to the point where they can empower you. So that you've learned enough, like a good professor, after working with you for 4 years, like Professor Kurt said, okay, is now he's ready as you go out. You're ready to run with the ball. So you want to get to the point where people can be empowered, because you give them the opportunity to think for themselves. You gradually delegated more and more towards them, and they're ready. So that's where you want to be at the end of your 4 years at Western New England as a sport management major. You want to be ready to go out to the field, okay, and just like a lot of you are working with Professor Kurt right now, or I should say Provost Kurt. Sorry. All right.
Temporary assignment.
And you're working with him. You're involved. You're having opportunities to learn and grow. And that all prepares you for the top, which is empowerment. And I think that sports is a great tool for growing and learning about yourself. And I see a special value in that aspect of the sport, and that's one of the things that kept me in sport, and why I'm still, I'm at Western New England now with the tennis team, and I like to see people develop. You have people coming to the college, all right, really for 2 reasons. One is that it's a great academic fit, and very often, if you look at everybody on the field, just about every one of them wouldn't be here without the other part, which is the sport. Why? Because they've been doing it their whole life. Okay? And if you're going to spend all the time on the football team and just finish at the end of your 4 years, what'd you learn? Well, I can throw a football, or I can tackle better. It's empty. It's all the other things. And I think it's the responsibility of the coach to teach those other things. Because sport in itself is neither good nor bad. It depends on how it's led. And I think because people are so passionate about it, it has such opportunity to develop people that that's one of the exciting things of having a career in coaching.
A lot of nodding heads. You're taking it in, Coach. Hey, you guys are thinking about some questions you want to ask Dr. Posner, but I want to show you a couple more slides here. This is Dr. Posner showing he's still got game. And the one on the left is 1999, I believe. And the one on the right, that was 1993, a few years earlier. What are you doing? Showing off for your alumni there?
Yeah, this was at the end of a gymnastics exhibition show. Some of the alumni wanted to sit by
and somebody says, Coach, get up there, show us how it's done.
And then the other is the sport management department wanted to post a picture in the sport management department of everybody recreating. So they had one of the coaches, one of the professors was in a canoe. So when I was in practice, I just had them take a quick shot.
Now, do you still walk on your hands at home?
I can still do a handstand. I'm getting over a foot injury now, so I haven't turned upside down for a while. But I can still walk on my hands, and I have to be a little more careful now.
You guys ready with your questions?
anything, you know, it doesn't, don't say, oh my gosh, you know, I don't want to ask him this, maybe he'll think this.
Well, I want to kind of tee up some background first, that today in 2020, there are only 13 remaining men's gymnastics programs in the entire country. Springfield College is the only Division III program. Dr. Posner has been competing most of his career against these Division I schools because it's all dried up in Divisions II and III. Springfield College has been at it for 110 years now, I believe, gymnastics, and it's a long and storied and steep tradition, and so I hope they don't give it up. But you know, it's still going strong. But you can see how, in its heyday, men's gymnastics, I don't know if you ever got up to 200 programs, but 100 plus, right?
Yeah, when I was started, it was like 165 programs,
Yep.
and in Division II and III, there was like 60.
Yeah.
And so we had the opportunity to go to both nationals. All right. In other words, when I started at Springfield, we were in the Division II, III nationals. In other words, most sports have 3 divisions, and they have different philosophies. Okay, Division III, which is, you know, participation and excellence. Okay, but as a co-curricular educational experience, and Division II, which has some scholarships, and then Division I, which has many scholarships and really a spectator influence. You have to have a certain size of your stadium even to have, you know, a football program, and it's more, it has different rules. So when I started at Springfield, we had a Division II, III nationals, NCAA, and then they dropped the NCAA because it goes on the amount of schools that have a program. All right, you have to have a certain percentage of colleges have a program. So
in order to have an NCAA championship.
in order for the NCAA to sponsor it. So then the United States Gymnastics Federation picked up the championship, and it was called the USA Collegiate Championship. All right, and then and then the Division II, III continued to erode. So what we did is we invited Division I schools that didn't have any scholarships to try and keep apples with apples. So we got creative. So the championships have over my years have have changed, and with COVID, a lot of athletic programs at a lot of colleges have been cut for the money because of finances.
So would you say it's equipment intensive, so it's an expensive sport to sponsor in part? I know Title IX is a big part of the equation, but is the cost of the sport prohibitive for many institutions to sponsor it?
No, I don't think so, because once you have the equipment, it's steel. How you don't need a new high bar every year. It's high bar you can have for 20 years. So it's not that. It's just there were 2 things. Title IX is a good thing. It gave a lot of women opportunity, but there's 2 ways to be in compliance with Title IX. 1, eliminate men's programs. 2, raise more revenue, keep the men's programs, and then you can have that many more women's programs. Well, unfortunately, some decisions of colleges were made that they couldn't raise money, so that they had to drop, men's programs, and they dropped a lot of wrestling programs, gymnastics programs, and they cut track programs. I mean, not completely, but they cut the participation level, and that hurt, and it was not on purpose. It was kind of an unintended consequence. And Title IX certainly did great things for women's programs. And then the other thing is that I think the high school participation dwindled when they opened up gymnastics clubs. Okay, because then also the whole nature of what gymnastics was changed. I mean, when there were a lot of high schools, you could work out in gymnastics for 2 months, you know, 2 months of the year and be competitive, because you could climb the rope, and if you're a good athlete, you could participate. But then what happened is when they started clubs, the shift it changed so that it was kind of an all or nothing thing. So you'd have a kid train in a club and then go to their high school and compete and win everything. So it was really discouraging. So anyway, that's so the high school programs dropped, which caused you know, some of the college programs to drop, and here we are. Although, as far as excellence, you know, we're still amongst the top in the world in gymnastics, in part because of the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an ironical situation.
Yeah. Same with the women's side and women's figure skating. A lot of them are products of clubs, private clubs.
Absolutely. In fact, the women, it's even crazier, because a lot of the women will, you see, a lot of the men are older. Okay, they're competing in the Olympics in their 20s, their upper 20s. Okay, because physiologically, you continue to get stronger till your 20s. Okay, all right, and because it's a sport that relies so much on relative body strength, where you know, women, the percent body fat for their body weight changes as they reach adulthood. So it's harder. Much harder. It's easier for a man to compete in his 20s, easier, and it's harder for a woman. So a lot of the women, they, you know, as young kids, they go away from home and they train, which is a whole nother issue, okay? And you know, so they're reaching their peak at a much earlier age. And the Olympic teams are much younger for women.
Yeah, you see it at the Olympics and the World Championship teams on the women's side, they're teenagers, right?
Right.
And they're at the peak of their game.
Right.
It's incredible. All right, fire away. Go ahead, Ethan.
So out of all of the skills and characteristics that you picked up on as an athlete in gymnastics, which skill or characteristic has been most beneficial to you in coaching and teaching?
Well, it starts on the base, you know, the learning how to work hard, you know, learning how to set goals, learning how to visualize success, learning how to focus on the everyday rather than just winning, you know, the everyday, the step by step. And I think that process is the same in everything, whether you're a piano player or whether you want to be a good student, you know. If you just think you want to get an A, okay, and you don't really want to learn, it's short-sighted. You know, it's a process where you have to learn how to learn and how to dedicate yourself and how to focus and how to work hard. So I think that's the root of a mastery orientation. And I think that has helped me in whatever I wanted to do, whether it was going for a PhD or whether it's coaching, or whether and I learned a lot of that, you know, as an athlete.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Is there a piece of advice that maybe you got when you started coaching, or even when you were an athlete, that stuck with you that maybe you want to give to like younger professionals like ourselves?
Yeah, you know, you got to put yourself and make sure your environment that you're breeding your self-confidence, okay? And if you're not, you might have to change that. Look, you know, try and alter that situation. You got to look for ways to pat yourself on the back and feel good about yourself, because if you feel good about yourself, it's easier to achieve. And hopefully you're with people that help you do that. And if you're not, then you've got to find some people that'll help you do that, because you know, positive feedback and learning how to learn and rewarding yourself for the little steps along the way is all part of the process, and I think that's very important.
Thank you.
Damon, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, and I know there's probably a lot of them, but like through your experiences coaching and participating in and competing in gymnastics, like what is one of like the more memorable takeaways that you've gotten from a career in that sport?
Okay. You know, it just becomes like a family. You know, I still, you know, I keep in touch with the athletes on the team. I keep in touch with the athletes that I was on the team in college with. And I keep in touch with my coaches. You know, I mean, like I had some really special people that pulled me through. One was a guy that was, when I went back to Long Island, nobody would let me in their schools to train. And there was this one guy, Tony Grandinetti, in Locust Valley, New York. And he was a big thing in the area. It was a small town, and he was a football official, the gymnastics coach at the high school. And he said, hey, you know what? This kid wants to train, okay? Fire me, I'm gonna let him train, okay? And he was a real reason why I was able to improve. And I go to his gym a lot. And, you know, he recently passed, but I was friends, you know, he encouraged me throughout my life. You know, when I was thinking about my PhD, the first guy I called was M. He encouraged me, and I kept in touch with him. And the other guy, another guy, when I went to gymnastic camp, I met a coach from Chicago. His name was Paul Zert. Paul Zert became an Olympic coach, and now he runs a gymnastics academy with Bart Connor, who was an Olympian. And you know, it's the people. So I think, as I said, it's the relationships. You know, it's the people. It becomes a family. And I'm sure that you'll hear that from if you participate as a team, you probably feel something like that. If you talk to the football coach, I'm sure he'd say that. If you talk to the basketball coach, if you talk to the tennis coach, it's about the relationship. It's about the struggle. You know, you're doing something that you really like to do, and you're passionate about it, and the struggle to achieve anything. There's a real value to that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, I wish I could dial up this video that I just tried to launch. I could not get it up. But it was your 35th anniversary of men's gymnastics at Cal, and you were honored there, and you got up to the podium, and you gave a 2-minute talk about the journey, and you just mentioned staying in touch with your teammates. You talked about life since your college years as a journey. You highlighted the friendships and the memories that your experience as a gymnast and a coach gave you, but also the hard work and the focus. And that nicely captured it, but I couldn't get it up. So you talked about it here, but you also gave credit, and you said that your last line was, "It all started at Cal."
Well, you know, the achieving at a higher level started at Cal, but the learning how to work really started at high school, because I was really, I was concentrating on it so much. But at Cal, we lived it. I mean, we trained twice a day. We were coming in from, now we had state, we were the national champions. We had state champions from just about every state. And it was an incredible pressure cooker, because you had some of the best professors in the world, and the last thing you would never tell them you were an athlete, okay? Because there was no special treatment, okay? And so you were getting busted in school. I mean, the most rigorous academic program. And then in the gym, we had state champions from all over the place. And actually, there were two coaches. One, you know, Watanabe was an incredible technician, but he was hard to get close to because he put himself, you know, it just wasn't the way, you know. And then the other coach, you know, he wanted to win a national championship really badly, and I think a little bit too badly. And you know, it was a pressure cooker, because you knew that if you had a bad day, you might lose your spot. And I think that that caused some injuries, but it really pushed you. And I think it was really good for some and not good for others. Certainly if you weren't motivated, totally motivated, it was good because you knew what you had to do to earn a spot. But if you're already motivated, you could break because you know, sometimes you need somebody, the coach, to put his arm around you and say, hey, you know what, you had enough, go home today. Because, you know, more is not always better. But it was, you know, it was a great experience. I loved the Bay Area. I loved Cal. It was in the 70s. It was right after, you know,
1968, Mexico City,
68.
Black Power salute.
Yeah, it was that, and then and it was you know, we had Janis Joplin in People's Park, and it was dynamic. It was just you know, it was just, you walk, if you just walk into classes, you know, you'd see Hare Krishnas, you know, you'd see street musicians, you'd see mimes, religious people. I mean, it was just, it was overwhelming, and it was you know, a terrific experience. But the day was a pressure cooker.
Steve, it's hard to believe we've gone over an hour here, and we could talk for another half hour easily, but we're going to wrap it here. This has been a very delightful evening.
Thank you.
We thank you for coming and to share insights of your career. I didn't even get into Dr. Posner being an author of not just this publication, of other articles as well, and numerous accolades as Coach of the Year, Collegiate Gymnastics Association, ECAC, NCAA East Regional Coach of the Year, just tons of stuff. And as you can tell, he can talk a lot more. Is that mine? But we're going to wrap it here. I'm going to invite the Vice President of the Sport Management Association to make a presentation to a Golden Bear of Cal Berkeley and an honorary Golden Bear of Western New England.
I just want to thank you for coming tonight and speaking to
Very
us.
nice.
And we wanted to present you with
I appreciate
the
it.
sweatshirt.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming, guys. This was a blast.
And I'm going to ask the Senior Sport Management Major Connor Murphy to present you with a token of our appreciation.
So
Go ahead.
on behalf of Professor Amakawa, the Alumni Association, and the Center for International Sport Business, we'd like to just provide you with a frame of the, you know, to commemorate the event of you coming in here, and we all thank you very much for telling us about leadership and just athletics as a whole. So
I'm honored to be here, and I really appreciate the invite. So thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
All right, thank you guys for coming and being part of this program. And thank you for doing the video recording. I know you guys have work to do. Tomorrow's a school day, right?